Alexander C. Bennett has 2 PhDs in Human Studies and Sciences from the University of Canterbury and Kyoto University. He holds the ranks of 7th Dan Kyoshi in Kendo, 5th Dan in Iaido and Naginata, 3rd Dan in Jukendo and Tankendo. He is professor at Kansai University of both Kendo and Japanese culture and history, vice president of the International Naginata Federation, member of the International Committee of the All Japan Kendo Federation, director at the Japanese Academy of Budo, co-founder of the Kendo World Magazine, and author of several books in English and Japanese. Season 1, Episode 8, The Origins of Modern Budo. Part 1, Kodokan Judo.
So we're talking about modern Budo as such. So I guess, modern Budo really sort of starts with Judo and Kano Jigoro, who in 1882 created Kodokan Judo, which now is famous throughout the world as an Olympic sport. Yeah, his motivation for learning jujutsu, so the story goes, was because he was a small kid, but he was also very clever, and he used to get picked on, he used to get bullied, and so he wanted to be able to teach these bullies a lesson, and he heard that jujutsu was a martial art where a small person can defeat a big person. It's not about size or strength. It's about how you destabilize and use your opponent's strength against them and so on. And that's why he started studying jujutsu, and he realized that with a little bit of tweaking, getting rid of the really dangerous techniques, he could perhaps make judo a kind of a sport that would be beneficial in schools as a kind of a way of like physical education, but not only physical. The lessons that you learn through judo about how to persevere, respect, to use your brain to come up with strategies and all this sort of thing. This could be a good way of educating young Japanese people how to think as well, and educate them in morality. So he figured that, if I make my own style of jujutsu, which lots of people can do at the same time and it's safe, then this could be a really beneficial thing in our schools. He created, when you think about it, right, it's like, if you think about it now, you think, wow, it's ridiculous, because he was only 22 when he created the Kodokan Judo. If I was 22 and I said, yep, here's Alec Liu, okay, so come and join my Liu, come and join my school. And people go, well, what the hell, you don't know anything. You're only 22, for crying out loud. But he was very successful because, one, he was a good politician. Two, he was actually very clever, and the timing was really good. The timing, this is in the Meiji period, so this was the era in which Japan was trying to modernize. The Meiji Restoration happened in 1868, 1869 onwards, things in Japan started changing. They started introducing lots of systems from the West, the education, the legal system, and the military system, and so on and so forth. And part of the educational system, or making education compulsory for all Japanese kids, part of the education system was modelled on the Western style, which included gymnastics as physical education. But there were some people in the government and educators who thought, well, does everything have to be Western? I mean, when you think about it, you know, Japan has this all these martial arts that go back hundreds of years, and surely they would be a great addition in the school system today to teach young Japanese about traditional Japanese physical culture and also about their heritage. And so Kano Jigoro, with this in mind, and he graduated from what is now Tokyo University. He studied education. He was an education specialist, and he was greatly influenced by the educational ideas of Spencer, for example, and the whole concept of having three pillars in your education is physical, moral, and intellectual. And he thought, well, judo can be all of these. It can be all of these. Because there was a tradition, of course, throughout history in Bujutsu. It's not only about killing, but it's also about, you know, how do you develop your mind and your body. So, I mean, it's always had that kind of educational aspect to it. But the problem is, or was, that if you tried to introduce martial arts into the school curriculum, which ones do you introduce? Because all of the different ryuha have different, you know, modus operandi. They have different ideals, different techniques. Not to mention that a lot of the techniques were really dangerous. You don't want to teach that to kids, you know, in schools. Not a good move. And there needed to be some kind of standardized form of bujutsu that could be taught by one person to a large group at the same time instead of one-on-one. And it needs to be the same, whether you're in Tokyo or Kyoto or, you know, Hokkaido or, you know, Fukuoka or wherever. It needs to be the same. It needs to be the same curriculum, same techniques. It needs to be standardized. There was nothing like that in Japan at the time. There was lots of different schools. They might have branches somewhere, but there was nothing that was standardized throughout the country. And this is what Kano Jigoro set about doing, and he did it very, very well in that he kept an eye on what was needed in society at the time. And the government, the Ministry of Education, throughout the 1880s, 1890s and early 1900s was constantly petitioned by martial artists and educators to somehow include bujutsu, because it wasn't called budo, bujutsu into schools. The Ministry of Education did a number of surveys, and actually there was a really interesting one. There was a professor of, Professor of medicine, I think, Erwin Boltz, who was a German, and he was also included in one of the investigations to see whether martial arts would be appropriate to teach children in schools. And he said, hell yeah, this is great stuff. Japanese kids, they spend too much time studying. They need to use their bodies, and martial arts are perfect. But still, in spite of this enthusiasm from a non-Japanese, the Ministry of Education still found there were too many demerits in that it was dangerous. What about the hygiene? You know, the fact that it hasn't been standardized, and so for many decades, bujutsu was never accepted into the school system. But Kano Jigoro, every time when there would be some criticism made about it, he would say, okay, we'll change this, we'll fix this, I'll adapt, okay, and I'll keep working away, chipping away, until the Monbusho, the Ministry of Education, cannot say no anymore. And so he was a great innovator. what he had done is he had created judo from jujutsu, from various schools of jujutsu. And jujutsu is, it's hardcore, it's dangerous, right? You can break bones and stuff, but he took the dangerous techniques, which you still need because it's part of Budo culture, but he preserved them in kata so that they could still be practiced, but in controlled circumstances. But he also created something called randori, which is like sparring. And the kind of techniques that you can use in sparring are restricted, but they're very well organized so that people could compete with each other safely and learn various principles, such as tsukuri and kuzushi and kake. So that's the process of destabilizing your opponent and then applying a technique, whatever that is. And so it could become, in one sense it was very practical, but the other sense it was also safe and suitable to teach to children. And it was also very logical of the process of advancement. So he introduced the dan system, or the belts, that are so commonly associated with martial arts all around the world now, not only the Japanese ones. He actually took that from, I think, was it Go or Shogi? They had the dan grading system for these like Japanese chess, and he introduced them into judo. So it's like, well, if you've got Shodan, next is Nidan, next is Sandan, next is Yondan, and so on. It's very easy to gauge your process, your progress, and create goals for your training. But he also introduced gradually, as he matured as a person, he introduced various concepts that give meaning to why you are doing judo, not just to go out on a mat and fight with other people and have a good time. His whole idea was that right through studying judo, you become very strong in body and mind. And what is the point of this if you cannot use your strength for the benefit of other people? So eventually the Kodokan Judo, the mantra, if you like, the core concepts, Seiryoku Zenyo, which is the most efficient use of your energy, which Japan is really lacking these days, I think. And then Jita Kyoe, for the benefit or the prosperity of yourself and others. So by becoming a strong judoka, you also become a very useful member of society who is able to be of benefit to the country and to other people. So he created this doctrine.
In the next episode, we'll examine the origin of the word Budo, and also how other arts such as Aikido, Karate-do, and Kendo were built on the educational system of Judo.
And he didn't call it Kodokan Jujutsu, he called it Kodokan Judo. And this is quite revolutionary. What is the difference between jutsu and do? Because jujutsu in his day actually had a bit of a bad name. Other martial arts like Kendo or Kyudo and so forth, they were not called, they did not have do attached to them. Aikido, which you do, I mean, that's very much, it's based on a long history of, karate is another interesting example.
Stay tuned. You'll learn a lot about the history of Budo in the next episodes.